Yeah, Wednesday edition, Mr. Irrelevant of Alex Strouf with you, not from the Everlight Solar Studios in downtown Madison. I'm in downtown Beaver Dam, baby. We're partying today in the Slumberland Studios in Beaver Dam, powered by Daily Dodge TV, the Daily Dodge TV studios, which are actually currently under renovation. So I am the first person ever to use the renovated edition of these studios. What an honor it is to be with you on your Wednesday. Lots to get into. Badgers news, Packers news, NFL news. Molly Brown will join us, who's actually in the building. She'll just join us from a different part of the building here in Beaver Dam. And as always, we'll wrap up the show with what Strouf learned. But first, we go to the Everlight Solar Studios. Tiny Hand's not with us today. Ryan Wollersheim running the show for us on this Wednesday. And Ryan is an alum of the University of Wisconsin-Madison. How you feeling this week, buddy? You okay?
Okay. What are you talking about? It's not like the Badgers just failed in March again. Look, I'm used to this. All right, I was born in the darkness. All right, you merely adopted this. I'm used to this with the Badgers basketball program at this point.
Hold on. What do you mean by I merely adopted this?
Oh, well, hey, look, I'm not trying to say that we alums feel a little harder, but it is what it is. We actually feel it as a family, as a Badger family. But
okay. Excuse me.
I'm kidding, but no, we all know it. Yeah, look, the last 7 years, it feels a little numb at this point.
Yeah, no, you're right. The last 7 years have been completely underwhelming, especially in March for the Wisconsin Badgers. Greg Gard, a total record of 6-6 in the NCAA tournament, including only 2 wins since his last Sweet 16 appearance back in 2017. 2-4 since then, by the way, including a first-round exit this year to a number 12 seed in James Madison on Friday. The reaction has been completely ruckus over the course of the last 72 or so hours, obviously more than that since the Badgers have lost. But since we got back to work on Monday, a lot of people are split on whether or not the Badgers should or they think they should move on from Greg Gard. I think it's pretty evident at this point as we're almost a week removed now. Greg Gard will be the head coach of the Badgers. I said he would be on Monday, but I'm willing to have the conversation now. And as a guy that has tirelessly defended Greg Gard in the midst of some really tough months during the regular season over the course of the last few years, including a rough midseason stretch last year and obviously a season in which they missed the NCAA tournament, and then a 2-8 February this year. I've always said I think Greg Gard is the guy for the job, but to go down in the way they went down in the NCAA tournament against James Madison, that was why I'm willing to have the conversation. And I don't think that's being reactionary or overreactive to a bad loss. I think that's just how it has to go. You have to have tough conversations when expectations aren't met. And if you've learned anything under athletic director Chris McIntosh in his almost 3 years in his position, is that mediocrity isn't allowed. Right? You look at Paul Chryst with the football program. You look at Tony Granato with the men's hockey program. He makes firings and makes big swings when he brings in a new guy, and Luke Fickell and Magic Mike Hastings. I don't think it's quite time for that yet with the men's basketball team, but the seats should be hot, and it is for no reason except Greg Gard hasn't won in March. He's won regular season conference titles, 2 of them, in fact, and that's great. But the expectation under Bo Ryan was always a top 4 finish in the Big Ten, which the Badgers just missed out on this year, taking 5th place. And the Big Ten's only going to get bigger, by the way, so maybe those expectations should change a little bit. But this is a school that 10 years ago and 9 years ago was in the Final Four in back-to-back years. This is a school that has struggled with in-state recruiting in a state that has had solid recruits. We just saw another one last week, and Xavier Mitchell from Oshkosh North commit to Iowa State, right? I mean, so there are some things that you can look at and have problems with and issues with, but still think Greg Gard is a good guy and a good fit at the University of Wisconsin, because undeniably he is. But I think the conversation can stop now of whether or not he will be fired, because clearly he won't be, at least yet. And the Badgers have to have a solid March next year, assuming they make the NCAA tournament. Now, the big piece of news since we last talked on Monday is, of course, with A.J. Storr. A.J. Storr on social media yesterday announcing he will pursue NBA aspirations. However, he will maintain his college eligibility, meaning he won't hire an agent, but he will participate in workouts, in a combine, and try to be drafted in the upcoming NBA draft this June. The thing with A.J. Storr is he's only played, obviously, 2 years of collegiate ball, one at St. John's and now this past year at Wisconsin. And he is a good scorer. But he's also a volume shooter. He's a guy that needs to put up 15 shots a night, at least when he was at Wisconsin, that was the case. And he was a little bit streaky his sophomore year. He clearly has pure ability to be a very good basketball player, but I don't know that that necessarily means it translates at the next level. I wouldn't doubt that A.J. Storr is back at Wisconsin next year. But I think rightfully so, he's taking the avenue that A, leads to more money, and B, leads to everybody's dream that signs a Division I basketball scholarship. And that is to play at the next level. But I do think A.J. Storr is back in 2024 if I had to make a guess right now on March 27th. Ryan, are you with me or are you against me? A.J. Storr, a Badger in 24-25.
I would have to be against you on that one, I think, Strouf. I think that odds are if he does not go to the NBA, I got a bad feeling he's going somewhere else in college basketball. I could see him going to one of the bigger programs. I could see him going to the NBA draft, getting some, sort of feedback from NBA teams, maybe figuring out what he needs to work on to get to the next level. And then once he does figure that out, maybe it's moving on somewhere else where he can perform at a higher level and maybe perform against, I'm not saying against higher competition. The Big Ten obviously has great competition, but I think I would say that I could just see him going somewhere where they're going to give him more freedom, the freedom he would probably want.
That's interesting. David chimes in on YouTube, says AJ needs another year minimum to perform well if he wants to grade out as a first-round NBA talent. I think the flashes are worth a first-round pick. I'm not saying he's a lottery pick, but late first-round guy, there's clear ability in intangibles there that make him draftable, in my opinion. I don't know how it translates. And the NBA draft is a different breed than, say, the NFL draft because there are, obviously, A, a lot more players in the NFL that are on the field. But B, I think you get more of a leash as an NBA draft pick than you would as a first-round NFL draft pick. So we'll see. Ryan, I think your point on another program is interesting. I wouldn't doubt that either because I think in the age of name, image, likeness, when you can go get an athletic wing player like A.J. Storr is and the scoring ability that he brings, there could be a nice check at maybe an SEC school or an ACC school come next year. He can play anywhere. I think that's something he proved this year by being the leading scorer for the Wisconsin Badgers and consistently putting up a ton of shots and being that offensive flamethrower that they so desperately lacked in 2022 and 2023. So we will see with A.J. Storr, but that's the big news yesterday. And Greg Gard, obviously, the seat is warm, but I don't know that in the eyes of Chris McIntosh and the University of Wisconsin that it is necessarily scorching. Let's move on. NFL rule changes. A couple of these are interesting. Ryan, I don't know this term. Now, I read about it. I learned about it. I think it's going to be impossible to penalize. Hip drop tackle, was that something you were familiar with prior to yesterday?
I was familiar with this prior to yesterday. You remember when I believe it was Mark Andrews, the tight end for the Ravens, got injured late in the season? The linebacker Logan Wilson from the Bengals was the one who, I guess I wouldn't say injured him, but on the play where he was being tackled, he kind of lifts himself off the ground and while grabbing Andrews around the waist, kind of brings him down with his weight kind of from behind. And that's what the NFL is reportedly trying to outlaw going forward. I'm sure it will go perfectly.
That's where my head's at too, Ryan, right? And I was texting with Chris Orr yesterday. I should have asked him about this. I just feel like, and we've seen this before with other things, right? Like the roughing the passer rule when that was really big a couple of years back. I think these things are so hard to penalize and so hard to realize if you're a defender coming in full speed, right? You're just trying to make a play. I don't think you're intentionally trying to break somebody's leg. So I think this is going to be something that is overly penalized in 2024 in the NFL. But there is a different rule change that I'm excited about, except also I really don't know how it works. But we're going to have some great graphics to help us with this. So the NFL is adopting the XFL and USFL, I guess UFL now, kickoff returns. Well, look at that lower third graphic, Ryan. 4 different kick returns. Hey. You put your work in on that one. Nicely done. I like this. Now, Ryan, if you could pop up the graphic from the Athletic that we have, that pretty much shows where everybody needs to line up. So there's a start line, a setup zone, and then ultimately a landing zone. And the kicking team will be penalized if the football does not land in the landing zone. If it goes into the end zone for a touchback, it moves up to I believe it is the 30-yard line or the 35-yard line now, which is definitely a new rule. But I think this makes the re-signing for the Green Bay Packers of Keisean Nixon so important, right? The back-to-back All-Pro kick returner has some really interesting opportunities with this new setup, and I think it makes the kick return that much more important than it has been in years past. It's certainly something that has been talked about and has been a hot button topic at some of these owners' meetings, like the ones happening this week down in Orlando, Florida. The kickoff was something that they talked about eliminating entirely. And there was a proposal this week of, rather than an onside kick, doing a 4th and 20. You need to keep special teams alive. I know our guy Brad Nortman, who you hear weekdays on Kyle Bruston Nortman from 2 to 4 on ESPN Madison, is pumped about this because kickoffs are important, right? This is something that needs to be a part of the game. And that's why you bring back a guy like Keisean Nixon. And that's why a guy like Cordarrelle Patterson signed a deal with the Pittsburgh Steelers yesterday, because these are phenomenal plays, and you have the ability to change the game. Like we had that big kick return by Keisean Nixon in the divisional round against the San Francisco 49ers. And then ultimately, was it Eric Wilson, Ryan, who recovered the fumble in that playoff
Eric Wilson.
game? Yeah. Is Eric Wilson still – I think he's still a free agent. The Packers should bring him back. But
no, I believe they just re-signed him on Saturday. He's back.
I missed that.
The special teams ace. Let's go. Yes.
He is a special teams ace, especially in that game against San Fran. But I love this idea, Ryan. I'm fired up about this rule change. I think kick returns are going to be rejuvenated, rebirthed, if you will. It's going to be phenomenal. I think this is a positive rule change, more so than the one that I think will be over-penalized. You also have a video, I think, of like some of the strategy that will be built in. What was your video? You could also give us your thought process on this. You did a great job giving me a heads up on this. I'd rather you just explain it because you're a hell of a lot smarter than I am when it comes to this stuff.
So part of the changes that the XFL made, what will now be the UFL, was that there's this guy, Sam Schwartzstein, kind of a NFL rules expert, NFL expert, we'll just call him really. And he kind of helped revolutionize this idea of like creating the landing zone where the players and the receiving team start, where the kicking team starts, and making sure that by doing this, they're creating as much creativity as possible with how these returns are going to be going forward. Because as you'll see from the graphic we once again throw on the screen, the players aren't very far away from each other, and it seems like it's just going to end up in a mass collision of players right up against one another because they're so close to start. Yeah. But you actually realize that there's a lot more things you can do with this. You can get creative based off of that because players now have more freedom to actually like run almost formations with their kickoff and their kickoff returns. So here's a cool example that I found from Sam Schwartzstein on Twitter. You kind of see the receiver receives the ball, and then he does a quick end around to one of the guys who was on the receiving 30-yard line, and it's almost like a hook and ladder play on a kickoff. I mean, yeah. Is that not awesome?
That is fantastic. Dude, Keisean Nixon is going to be amazing next year. I'm not saying in the nickel by any means, but as a kick returner, I think he becomes even more of a dangerous weapon. Think about if they put Keisean Nixon and Jaden Reed back there together, Ryan. Like, I know it's only March, but that makes me very, very excited. And by the way, the Packers are paying their special teams coordinator more than anybody else in the NFL.
And by the way, you're throwing out Jaden Reed. Does this not sound like the perfect thing for Christian Watson? I mean, just get him the ball in space. I mean, I know his injury history and whether he's available is going to be tough, but if he is, just getting him the ball in space with the room to run and guys out in front of him blocking, I mean, that feels like the perfect job for him.
No doubt about it. All right, let's bring in Molly Brand, who's also in the WBEV and ESPN Beaver Dam building with me. She's just not in the same room as me. I wanted to be selfish because I was told this is the first time the renovated Daily Dodge TV studios will be used, so I wanted it all to myself. But Molly Brand joins us now. The three of us, me, Ryan, and Molly, you can hear us afternoon drive the next couple of days, Thursday, Friday on Rutledge and Hamilton on ESPN Madison. So we're getting the job done a day early.
Let's go.
Hi, Molly. I wanted to be selfish. Where are you at?
Hi, I am in the large conference room. Yeah, I am here by myself though, so.
So I took the Daily Dodge TV studios. You took a large conference room. We don't have like a more creative name. I know at ESPN Madison, to bring you behind the curtain, we kill people off. Like people that used to work in Madison that no longer work in Madison, we name conference rooms after them, even though they're alive and well and still with our company. This is just called the large conference room?
It is just called the large conference room, I believe. I think there's a small conference room right next to me, so I feel a little guilty that I'm in the big one, but I was told it wasn't needed to be used, so I'm just taking it. It can fit my big head.
There you go. It should be a little bit smaller now, though, because I wanted the DDTV studio all to myself. So I want to start with the big Packers news from yesterday, and that, of course, is the Packers bring in kicker competition for Anders Carlson. Greg Joseph, the former Minnesota Viking, is the newest Packers player as the Packers finally make another move in free agency, signing a kicker. Molly, good, bad, neutral? How do you feel about the Packers' addition of a kicker and Greg Joseph?
Why are we picking up the Viking sloppy seconds here? Like, that's what I don't get. What are we doing?
It's because they did it to us. They did it to us with Aaron Jones. No, but they did it to us with Aaron Jones. So I think that was just us saying, hey, we're getting you back now.
But that's stupid. I don't know. I mean, I do like it for the sense that it is going to bring competition for Anders Carlson, though. Like, that is something that he absolutely needs, right? So I'm hoping that it makes him a better kicker, but it'll be interesting to see. Like, do you think that they're going to hold on to Joseph for the season? What are they going to do?
No, here's the thing with the kicker, and here's how you know it's March 27th, is that we're going to have an in-depth conversation on the Packers kicking position. But it was one of note, right? Just 2 months ago when we were in the playoffs, and we saw the Packers fall to San Francisco after a couple of missed field goals. There were some missed extra points and field goals toward the end of the regular season. The thing with Brian Gutekunst is he is guilty almost to a fault when it comes to his draft picks, and Anders Carlson was one. And that is something that I think will come maybe back to the forefront here as the competition rolls on. Now, to your point, I think hopefully, yes, it does elevate Carlson's game. But no, I don't think Greg Joseph makes the active roster. And if he does, then that means Anders Carlson is gone and they made a big mistake. But I find it highly unlikely that Goody, just 1 year after drafting a kicker, using a draft pick on a kicker, will admit his mistake and say, yeah, maybe that wasn't the best pick I could have made there. And they just bring in the veteran who, to your point, wasn't all that great during his last 2 years in Minnesota. So, no, I don't think Joseph would be the starter, but I am intrigued to see if this helps Anders Carlson. I mean, competition is good at any position group, but I don't know how much it actually improves a guy who was, I don't want to say incompetent, but he was getting close to that towards the end of the regular season.
For sure. And maybe this is a dumb question, but I don't know. I feel like Joseph is probably a starting guy. Like, he is supposed to be on a 53-man roster, but is there any way that they could have him on the practice squad and then just pull him up when needed or when they think they might need him?
So it's a fair question, but I don't know that anybody would be thrilled about using a practice squad. And I don't know that Joseph would have any eligibility left, to be honest there. But I don't know that that would be a good spot for a kicker. Like, I feel like you could just go on the open market and find one if you really feel the need to move on. But if you feel the need to move on, do it earlier rather than later. I just don't know that Anders Carlson is the answer. But I got to be honest with you, Molly. I was not expecting too controversial, and he's way too old. How old is Greg Joseph? Does he fall into the over 30 group? I'll look that up quick. 29. So he actually is not part of that group where he's over 30. He will be by the time the season starts, though. August 4th birthday. So he would be one of, I think, 3 players then on the Packers that are age 30 or above, which is just an insane number still. And we're already looking at this team at the end of March as like, yeah, they're a favorite in the NFC, or at least one of the favorites in the NFC to head to the Super Bowl. When you look at the NFC North, Molly, obviously you're a Vikings fan, and so you keep up on them. The Lions were very good last year in the NFC Championship game. And the Bears were a 7-win team a year ago. They have the number 1 and number 9 overall picks in this year's draft. They bring in Keenan Allen. They load up on defense a little bit. They bring in DeAndre Swift at running back, and obviously Caleb Williams will be the number 1 overall pick. They're talking pretty openly about it as Ryan Poles has been doing plenty of interviews the last few days, their general manager. Like, is this the best division in football heading into the 2024 season in your mind? I think the only other ones that could have a debate with it is the AFC East with Miami and Buffalo and the New York Jets getting Aaron Rodgers back, or the NFC West with San Francisco, the Rams, the Seahawks, and the Cardinals with a healthy Kyler Murray. I think the NFC North might be the most intriguing of those three to me, though.
Definitely the most intriguing, I will say. I don't know about best, though, because I feel like it's very hard for me in my mind to get past the idea that the Bears are going to mess something up. You know what I mean? Like, so it's just like in my brain, yes, as a Packers fan, am I slightly worried about them? Am I nervous about the weapons that they could potentially have? Yes. But at the same time, it's just lingering in the back of my mind that I'm like, nah, they're still the Bears, you know? So I feel like the team that I am most threatened by in the North is obviously the Lions. I think it's going to be between the Lions and the Packers. I think we can all agree on that. But being the best division, though, I mean, I don't know. I'm really trying to think. I mean, they make a case. Like, it's hard because it's like,
sure.
We even brought up the NFC West that it's like, okay, the Cardinals. Like, who thinks of the Cardinals? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
no, I don't. I mean, I think every division probably has a dud. I mean, obviously the Patriots and the AFC East, but I think those other three teams could all be playoff teams. You mentioned the NFC West. I think Rams, Seahawks, maybe Seahawks. I'm interested to see what they do at quarterback.
I am
but then obviously the Niners coming off of the Super Bowl run. I think those are three potential playoff teams. And as much as I hate to admit it, like you say you think the Bears will screw it up. I mean, me too, just given history. But I don't know that that's a foregone conclusion. They've done a really nice job this offseason to do pretty much everything in their power to load up that offense to the point where anybody could step in and succeed. And that includes the number one overall pick, who's viewed as one of those generational prospects. I'll use air quotes for those of you listening on the audio side. In Caleb Williams, there's a good chance he steps in and has a C.J. Stroud-esque year, but there's also a chance he steps in and has a Bryce Young-esque year. Actually, I don't think he could be that bad. But I don't know. I think the Bears have a legitimate chance or a legitimate case to be made that they could be a playoff team in 2024. I don't think I'm crazy by saying that coming off a 7-win season with Justin Fields at the helm.
Maybe I'm crazy thinking this too, though, but as a Packers fan, I want that to happen. Like, I want them to be good. I want every team in the NFC North to be good. Like, okay, I hate the Vikings. I hate the Vikings more than any other team in the NFC North, partially because of my husband, but I can't stand them. But I still want them to be good competition. Like, I still want to see Justin Jefferson go against Jair. Like, I want to see all that fun stuff. But the thing with the Bears that I keep thinking about is I am very karma-driven. Like, I fully believe in karma.
Okay.
And the idea that the Bears treated Justin Fields so well by sending him to a team that he wanted to go to, that he was happy with going to, I feel like the Bears are going to get karma tenfold.
Oh, okay. So hold on. Let's dive into that for a moment. So you are would you say you're a karma belief person?
Believer. I'm a karma believer. Believe in karma.
So you believe that the Bears will be a better team because of the way they handled Justin Fields' exit?
I don't think it's going to hurt them. I think there's going to be some really good things their way because they treated the guy that they no longer wanted with respect. And I think that's something that the Packers haven't had. But then I think about it this way. The Packers are the outlier, right? The Packers have had pretty freaking good success for how many years? Decades. They've been lucky at quarterback. They've been lucky at so many different things, right? Even though they've mistreated players according to those players. You know what I mean? Like, so it's kind of hard to say, okay, the Packers haven't gotten bad karma from the way that they've treated people. You know, I don't know. This is where my mind goes. It's just my mind where I'm like, good karma, bad karma. I don't know.
I'm trying to dive into the mind of Molly Brown for a moment because I like where your head's at, but I just don't think karma and football correlate that way. I don't think that's how that works.
I think you're wrong.
But I think there may be a case to be made of something along the lines of like, hey, the locker room was happy with the way you got rid of their vocal leader, so maybe they won't rebel against management. And maybe that's the good karma. There might be a case to be made. You might be onto something there.
Fair. I don't know. We'll see. But like I said, I'm excited. I'm excited to see the NFC North, and I want each of the 4 teams to do well, and I want it to be kick-ass competition all season. That's what I'm looking forward to.
No, I did too. Last thing I want to hit with you, Molly, is Matt LaFleur spoke yesterday for the first time since the Packers signed running back Josh Jacobs. We've got about a 45-second clip from LaFleur on Josh Jacobs and his philosophy, if you will, around the running back position. Here's LaFleur yesterday in Orlando.
You guys know how I feel philosophically. I think you have to have multiple backs in this league. Those guys take a beating. Now, it's always a luxury when you have a guy that can take those number of carries and be a high volume guy, but I don't see it really changing much in terms of how we want to use our backs. I always think it's a marathon. The NFL season's a marathon, and you need your best players healthy, especially at the end of the season, and then when, kind of like a season ago, when your back's against the rope, so to speak, then you kind of unleash it, and you got to do whatever you got to do to win. So, but I think that's a luxury for us, that he is capable of carrying the ball that many times.
So a couple of takeaways from that. Number one, Josh Jacobs, we've known this all along. This is not rocket science or brain surgery or anything new. Josh Jacobs is an upgrade at the running back position from Aaron Jones. As much as I like Aaron Jones, and as good as Aaron Jones was at the last 5 games of the Packers' 23 season, Josh Jacobs is an upgrade. He's younger. He's more durable. He's a total between the tackles guy. He's a bulldozer. He's a great running back. But to hear LaFleur say, I firmly believe we can use multiple backs and we don't need to change what we do that much, I just don't buy that. Because Aaron Jones can do so many things that Josh Jacobs can do, just not as well as Aaron Jones, right? And that's some of the play action stuff, that's some of the receiving stuff, and that's some of the speed stuff, right? Josh Jacobs is more of a downhill bulldozer. So I'm curious, and then they re-sign a guy who's just like Josh Jacobs in that department, but worse in A.J. Dillon. So maybe LaFleur is giving us a look inside the war room a little bit and saying, hey, maybe we do still draft a running back to back up Josh Jacobs and A.J. Dillon becomes the third option. But I think you have to change your game plan just based on the type of backs you have in the running back room. But I like the glowing review from LaFleur on Josh Jacobs and the fact that he did point out, you let those guys fly a little bit more later in the season, which we obviously saw with Aaron Jones last year. Those are my takeaways.
Yeah, no, my first thought as he was talking was, I was like, you're full of crap, right? Like, I don't mean that in like a mean way per se, but how are you going to say that your game plan isn't going to change that much? Because I look at Josh Jacobs and I'm like, he's totally different than the way that Aaron Jones was. And then you think about it too. So what is A.J. Dillon the backup? Is it Emmanuel Wilson? Like who's going to be the tandem duo? Or are we just not even thinking about them like that?
Yeah, I don't know that we view it as a tandem like we did with Jones and Dillon, at least going into this season. And obviously Jones dealing with the injuries he did, you never really saw the two of them together because then Dillon was hurt toward the end of the year. But 2 years ago, for example, right, we viewed it as I probably called it the best 1-2 punch in the NFL in Jones and Dillon, when clearly it just never really got to that level. I think you're going to view it as Josh Jacobs as your running back. And if A.J. Dillon is on the field sometimes, that's fine. I don't know that we'll see much of Emmanuel Wilson, who I referred to as my guy because I was so scared when he was on the field during the playoffs. Like, I just didn't think he belonged out there. Maybe he's better in year 2, and he can do some of the things that A.J. Dillon and Josh Jacobs maybe don't thrive at. I mean, I would rather have Jacobs on the field every day of the week than Emmanuel Wilson, but maybe there's a couple of sets that they have with Wilson designed into him. But I would guess, Molly, and I would advocate for maybe drafting a running back or 2, maybe a day 2 pick and a day 3 pick, spend it on a running back, right? Like, we bring up the name on this show all the time, more jokingly than seriously, but Isaac Orendo, the former Badger who tested out of the water, man, at the NFL Combine. He had like a 9.98 relative athletic score, which was the second best ever since the 1980s. The only running back that ever tested better than him was Saquon Barkley, who was a bona fide top 5 pick. So I would really like to see them spend some draft capital on running backs, and that way there's a bunch of competition in that room. And to go back to our kicker conversation, which was so great that let us off, I think competition just breeds results, right? And I think bringing in some guys that are younger and can be either a practice squad piece or a depth piece That's something I'd advocate for because, to be real honest with you, I'm not very high on A.J. Dillon unless he is running for the mayor of Door County, which doesn't actually exist.
No, that's exactly where my mind went too. But it's just hard for me to think about the Packers offense not having an Aaron Jones. And yeah, I know that Josh Jacobs is good, and I'm very excited to see what he looks like. But it's hard for me just to envision like a huge, powerful back like Josh Jacobs with no smaller, quick Aaron Jones. I don't know. Maybe that's something I just got to work out, but I definitely think that they should get somebody in the draft. I certainly do. But wasn't it the best? It was literally the best time when we thought that we were going to have both.
Jacobs
right
and
now,
Jones, you mean? Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, would you still take Aaron Jones right now? I absolutely would.
No doubt. Could you imagine? I mean, this offense would be so freaking nasty if both those guys were under. I mean, think about it, right? The skill position strictly. You have those two young, blossoming tight ends. You've got a ton of stud receivers who are will be in their second and third year. And I wouldn't be shocked if they had another rookie this year. And then you look at the running back position. You've got Jacobs and Jones, who are just, I believe Jason Wilde called them right when the Packers signed Josh Jacobs, and we were under the impression both of them would be the backs. Thunder and lightning, right? Like two backs that provide something pretty different from one another and can be so complementary if they're both on the field. This would be the nastiest offense in the NFL. I know that's an insane thing to say when San Francisco exists and Kansas City exists, but I would be so fired up about the possibilities of those two on the field at the same time. But it's okay. Like, I still think they upgraded. I still think they're in a better spot going into week one this year than they were going into week one last year. And that's because Josh Jacobs is a surefire top five back in this league. And he's young, right? He's only 26 years old. He's going to do some things we haven't seen a back do in a while, outside of maybe some of the highest moments of Aaron Jones, which include that 5-game stretch at the end of the season. But it's just, it just proves once again, a business is a business, and it is what it is. But it is a great, great move by the Packers to upgrade this position. And we'll see what they do in the draft. You got to get some offensive line help. And another priority of this offseason coming up in just over a month is that Jordan Love extension. What does that look like? What's the dollars behind that? How long is the window open? But I think all of us are operating under the standpoint of, hey, the next 3 years are the Super Bowl window, at least this Super Bowl window, with Jordan Love playing the way he did at the end of last season. Championship or bust probably isn't the mantra next year, but it's certainly, hey, compete for the NFC North, get a higher seed than the last team in the NFC playoffs next year, and just cross your fingers and hope they make a run, because it seems like a team that is certainly queued up to do so.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say, though, it's crazy to me how people aren't panicking about not having Aaron Jones. Because I feel like I kind of am. I think you can look at last season and think of all the games that the Packers didn't have him in. They weren't nearly as successful as when he was in the game. And I don't know how that's not being brought up more. Yes, you're getting somebody like Josh Jacobs. Yes, he may be perceived as an upgrade compared to Aaron Jones. But, Aaron Jones knew the playbook. He knows the system. He knows the other players. He was a leader in the locker room. There's so much that goes into it that I think that we are very much undervaluing what Aaron Jones was to this offense.
It's an interesting point, and I think it's a conversation that it's been had a bit, but I think now, we're just back into the excitement of, okay, the draft is coming up, and okay, Josh Jacobs is an upgrade. It's an interesting business decision, right? But it's the same thing we doubted Gutekunst for a year ago, and that is all this the youth movement that they called it, right? Moving to younger players that probably have a little bit more tread on the tires. Now, the issue with that argument is, when it comes specifically to Aaron Jones, is we always said Matt LaFleur underutilized him, right? He only got 20 carries in I think 10 games in his career as a Packer, which they went 7-1 if it was 8 games or 10 games. They only lost one game when Aaron Jones touched the ball 20 times or more, at least in terms of carries. So he was often underutilized. But last year he dealt with injuries that come with age. And I think moving on to a guy that's been more durable and has dealt with less injuries. And, he was a first-team All-Pro 2 years ago, right? It is undeniably an upgrade. but he was huge to this team. He's a great vocal leader. He was a vibes guy, if you will, if you subscribe to that term. I think it's something that will remain to be seen. But as we've learned under Matt LaFleur, I don't know how much work the running back truly is getting in terms of carries in September and October. It'll truthfully be seen in November, December, and hopefully deep into January next year. So it might be a wait and see thing more than it is hey, this maybe isn't as big of an upgrade as we think.
For sure. Yeah, no, a lot to look forward to. Can you believe the draft is only a couple weeks away?
Yeah, we got to get into some draft talk here in the next couple weeks.
Okay,
I'm not
so
as big as I used to be.
Sorry. Josh DiMaggio from Jen Game and Chewy, the producer over there. He's like a huge draft guy. Like he is like the Mel Kiper of ESPN Milwaukee, I swear to God. Like where do you land on that scale of like, I don't care to I'm the Mel Kiper of ESPN Madison?
Definitely somewhere in the middle. I've been told I sound like Mel Kiper when I get fired up and I start talking really fast.
Oh, come on.
Like there are some. I'm serious. People have said that before. When I get going very fast, there are some diction similarities between me and Mel Kiper Jr. And I don't know if I take that as a compliment or a diss, but I'm somewhere in the middle. Like I care. It's just what we know about the Packers in the draft is they never do anything sexy in the first round unless they draft a highly rated quarterback that fell to them in the mid-20s, like they did in 2020 and like they did back in 2005 with Aaron Rodgers and Jordan Love. Pretty much every draft pick since Aaron Rodgers in 2005 has been defense and one quarterback, and otherwise the only other offensive picks in the first round have been offensive linemen. So it's just this is a very not sexy time of year for the Packers because when the draft rolls around in a couple of weeks, they're going to draft somebody on defense, and it probably won't be a safety. It'll probably be a inside linebacker that you don't know a ton about or a defensive line depth piece that you don't know a ton about. It's just like last year, right? We all expected a wide receiver, and they drafted edge guy that barely played his first year in Lucas Van Ness. And Van Ness, who I think will have a big role in this year's team, with the defensive scheme change with the new defensive coordinator, it just wasn't sexy. It just wasn't what we were expecting. In 2020, when we were also screaming wide receiver in a stacked wide receiver class, they drafted Jordan Love, who didn't play for the next 3 years. So I think if I wasn't a Packers fan, maybe my answer is different. But as a Packers fan, I've just kind of pulled out more the last few years because I just know they're not going to do anything that sexy in the first round unless it's a quarterback.
You brought up an Iowa Hawkeye and Lucas Van Ness. What do you think about Cooper DeJean? Are they going to get him?
I think he goes before 25. I think he's viewed as one of the highest-rated corners. He's viewed as the best safety, according to Mel Kiper Jr., who was on Will the Intention a couple of weeks ago. I think he'll probably go late teens, early 20s. Oh, I love that sound. That's the best sound in the world right there. Nicely done, Wooly. So if DeJean is there at 25, I'm all for it. I just don't think it happens. I think they'll go late round safeties. They'll probably go a corner on day 2. But like I wouldn't be shocked, Molly, if this is how the Packers draft comes out. I know they have 11 picks. I would guess they'll probably end up with somewhere around 9, and add some more picks the next year because that seemingly is what they do every year. I think they go either linebacker or offensive lineman round 1. I think they have 2 day 2 picks. I bet they go corner, running back, and then day 3 they go safety, offensive line, defensive line. Maybe like a 7th round receiver. I don't know how sexy this draft will be because, and I hate to keep using that word, but Goody is more about that. He's like Marshawn Lynch. He's all about that action. He's all about that action, boss, and he is. But he finds a way to bring in guys. Number one, that he loves that RAS that I brought up earlier, the relative athletic score. But he brings in guys that he think can actually pack a punch, that can provide early despite being a 6th or a 7th round pick. If that's not in year 1, typically it's in year 2. We saw it with Rasheed Walker. We saw it last year with Carrington Valentine, who was a 7th round pick, Anthony Johnson Jr. So I just don't know how much we'll look at this draft and be like, wow, he knocked it out of the park. But come November, we might be saying, wow, That was a hell of a lot better than I anticipated. So I'm ready for the draft. I'm excited for it because it's pretty much the end of the offseason and the beginning of, okay, football's coming. We've got warm weather, and then we've got football. But I don't know that I will be diving into the top 1,500 prospects like Joshie DiMaggio will be.
You sound like you're very much in Goody We Trust era.
Yeah, I am. I think he's earned our trust. Are you not in Goody We Trust era?
No, I'm in it. I don't know. I'm just like, whatever movie makes, we'll see how it plays out. And some are obviously going to flop, right? Like, that is a given. That's nobody's fault. It's going to happen. That's the way that it goes. But I think, like you said, like, he has a track record. We didn't believe in him going into this past year, and now we're more confident than ever, I feel like. So, in Goody We Trust. Hashtag in Goody We Trust.
Hashtag in Goody We Trust is a good way to end this. Now, even a guy like Lou Nichols, the 7th-round running back out of Central Michigan a year ago, I guess he was the flop because he didn't make the 53-man roster. Molly Brand, I'm with you Thursday, Friday from 4 to 6 on Rutledge and Hamilton, which you can watch right here on the ESPN Madison YouTube channel, as well as here if you're driving around on 100.5 ESPN. Thursday and Friday from 4 to 6. Molly Brand and Alex Strouf drive time. Woo-hoo. Look forward to it, Molly. Thanks.
Thanks.
You can find her on Twitter, by the way, at Molly Brown, ESPN. All right, you learn something new every day. I learned something new today. It is time now to wrap up the show, as we always do, with what Strouf learned. And what I learned isn't necessarily news, right? Caitlin Clark is the biggest name in sports. She's the most compelling athlete in sports. She is drawing more ratings than anybody else. Like, none of that is news to me. What is news to me, though, is what I read this morning from a league I actually tried to launch a podcast around back in, I think, 2018 was when that league launched, called The Big Three, run by Ice Cube. What? Ryan, did you know that about me? I tried to do a Big Three podcast back in
I need to know if that's still available somewhere. The Big Three Alex Strouf podcast? Come on. Who are you all about? Do you remember which team you really liked in the Big Three? Was it had to be Iverson's team, right?
No, it wasn't. It wasn't Iverson's team. It was Big Baby Glenn Davis's team. And I think they ended up winning the championship that year, but I don't remember the name of them. I don't remember any of the team names. But we had who was the guy we had on the show who was he played in the Big Three the first 2 seasons, but he was like a great college player in the 90s. I'm blanking on his name. I'll think of it before we get out of here. But there's a couple episodes of it somewhere I could dig up for you. But I was all in on the Big Three the first season or 2, and then I completely fell out of it. But I didn't realize, A, that it still existed. B, I didn't realize Ice Cube still ran it. And C, I didn't realize that the Big Three was making a big push for 2024. Ice Cube came out on Twitter today announcing that he had offered Caitlin Clark $5 million to join the Big Three rather than the WNBA. Now, a couple of things to look at this as, right? Like, financially, it's an intriguing move because WNBA salaries are nowhere near $5 million. Playing time, you're playing less, you're traveling probably about the same and making a ton more if you're Caitlin Clark. Now, the rules are different. There's only 3 players on the court. But it is interesting if you're Caitlin Clark. You're going to put a league on the map and revitalize it or rejuvenate, and like maybe not even right? Just put some new energy into a league that maybe hasn't had as much buzz as it will when you join it. And Caitlin Clark is expected to be and will be the number 1 overall pick in the WNBA draft of the Indiana Fever. The WNBA has existed for a long time, and the product and the numbers have gone up the last few years. But with Caitlin Clark, it's the Caitlin Clark effect. You're going to put so many new eyeballs on the WNBA, assuming she goes that route, which I still think she will. But the Big Three offering $5 million to her is super interesting. I don't think she takes it because I think in terms of endorsements and different things like that, obviously she's going to make money either way. She's in terms of notoriety, she's the biggest star already ever in women's basketball. And when she gets to the WNBA, who, by the way, their contract for TV rights is up at the end of next season. The Caitlin Clark effect is going to skyrocket that number, which will likely help with contracts and other things of the like. So Caitlin Clark is going to make whatever league she goes to profitable, more profitable than it has been, and it's going to have more eyeballs on it. But this big three offer to Caitlin Clark is absolutely insane to me, Ryan. Ice Cube and Caitlin Clark, certainly didn't expect that would make its way into the show today. I didn't even know those two.
That would be dude, Death Row Records, they need to make it happen. Was Ice Cube on Death Row? I honestly, I don't know. I'd have to ask Jim Rutledge that when he comes
I
back.
don't know.
It's a great question, but
I don't know.
I do appreciate Ice Cube doing this too, because it shows that he really cares about these women's basketball players too. Because I just looked it up.
Yeah.
The expected base salary for Caitlin Clark when she gets drafted, likely first overall. I mean, going to be first overall by the Indiana Fever.
Yeah.
She'll make $76,000 in her first season. That's the base salary in the WNBA.
That's yeah. I knew it was under 100K.
And you make a good point with the endorsements too. Being in a place like Indiana with
she'll make
fervent
millions.
basketball fan base, like she will make a lot that way. But it goes to show that if she does help skyrocket the WNBA, it could like lift all boats too. Great for other players around her as well.
Yeah, I mean, think about the longevity factor too. And I was thinking about that when I was talking before. Is Caitlin Clark's effect on the game in 2024 will be one thing, but her effect on the WNBA in 2044 is another thing, right? She's going to take this league to brand new heights that it's never been at. And I think, that's the route she will go. I also think that's probably the route she should go in terms of legacy and longevity. Because, look, I don't, as much as I appreciate Ice Cube's gesture, I just don't think he's going to be going to the top stars in the WNCA or NCAA women's basketball and saying, hey, here's $2 million, here's $3 million, here's $4 million, here's $5 million, come play for the big three instead of the WNBA. Like, I just don't think that's a thing that's going to happen after Caitlin Clark. Like, I don't think Paige Beckers is getting an offer from Ice Cube like Caitlin Clark did. So it's a fascinating story, but we'll see what comes of it, Ryan.
Certainly. What if he, instead of reaching out to other WNBA future players, he just reached out to all the guys on Twitter criticizing Caitlin Clark for being too aggro in the NCAA tournament? I would love if he
said make a team of the trolls?
Exactly. The trolls versus the stars. So how about Caitlin Clark and Caleb Williams versus like their two biggest trolls on Twitter?
Ooh. I mean,
that'd be entertainment.
I always think there
entertainment.
should be I've always thought there should be a show like that. There probably has been, where it's professional athletes taking on internet trolls. But then also, do you remember the show on, I think it was Adult Swim, called Celebrity Deathmatch? It was like an animated boxing show. Do you know what I'm talking about? Claymation.
Wait,
you know what I'm talking about?
It's claymation with celebrities?
Yeah, but like they would be in a boxing ring and they fight each other with like inappropriate voiceover. Do you have any idea what I think it was called Celebrity Deathmatch. I might be making that up.
Do you have a podcast for this too? I would love to hear your breakdown.
Just went into the big three for 1 or 2 years, and let me just say, Ryan, we have more people watching right now on YouTube than ever watched the big three podcast.
But what if you became the Max Kellerman of celebrity boxing? Like, could you imagine?
I mean, it's a route I'm interested in. There is a lane. I mean, there is a niche there that has not been, or niche, however you want to say that word, that has not been executed. So it is an idea. It certainly is an idea. All right. Big thanks to Molly Brand for joining. Big thanks to Ryan Rollershine for stepping in for Hunter. He'll be back with us on Friday on today's Mr. Relevant back in the Everlight Solar Studio. A big thanks to everybody. Ninja here at ESPN Beaver Dam for helping me out, getting me set up down here in the Slumberland Studios, Daily Dodge TV. On 95.3 WBEV at 1430 ESPN Beaver Dam. We're back with you in Madison on Friday. Can't wait to talk to you more than hopefully no more people leaving the University of Wisconsin men's basketball team. I would prefer that not be the case with the AJ Storr news, but time will tell. We will see. Have a great rest of your Wednesday. We'll back with you Friday. This has been Mr. Relevant. I'm Alex Strouf. Peace.